Richland High School, Class of 1989. Welcome to the official 35th Annual Reunion Podcast, where we talk all things reunion. And now, here's your host, Brian Kirk.
Thank you, Devin, and welcome to the Richland High School's Class of 89's Pre-Reunion Countdown podcast for April 27th, 2024. This is Brian Kirk, and we're only 12 weeks away. 12 weeks away from our 35th reunion. And today's episode is a salute to teachers. 3 of our fellow 89ers that became teachers will join us and share special moments from their careers, along with memories from their years at Richland High School. So get your pencils sharpened, your lunch packed up, and your boots tied tight, and let's say hello to Amy Mull Smith, Emily Starnes Kinsky, and Angie Smith. Hello, everybody. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Emily, let's start with you. How are you doing?
Hello. I'm doing great, Brian.
Great to have you. We also have Angie Smith with us today. Hello, Angie.
Hey, Brian. Happy to be here.
Great. And we also have Amy Mull Smith today with us. Hello, Amy.
Hello. I'm happy to be here.
Great to have all three of you here today. We're going to talk about your role as a teacher and some of the memories you have from high school. Memories you have from school growing up in the mid-cities there, so in North Richland Hills. I know that many of us went to the same junior high, so that's going to annoy all those listeners from other junior highs.
If I'm not mistaken, aren't we all Falcons right here on this podcast? I believe we are.
Yes, we are.
Amy, I'm waiting for the sound effect.
Oh!
Go Falcons. I've been to 2 reunions, and I think one or both times I went, we had a group picture of all the ones from certain junior highs. And it seems like North Richland had the most in those pictures. So let's see if North Richland can maintain that honor, or we might get dethroned by one of the other schools. Probably not going to happen, but if it does, hats off to you. So let's hear from you, and let's hear more about what you're doing today. And let's start with Emily. You want to start with you?
Sure. I am a full professor at West Texas A&M University, and I teach in the communication department. And in between my master's and doctorate, I taught high school for 7 years at Trinity Christian High School in Lubbock, too. So 2 different levels. At that point, we went out. I taught at Pepperdine for 3 years. So we went, when I graduated, we went to California and loved it there.
Malibu, California. Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
No gorgeous. Tumbleweeds in Malibu, really, I don't think.
No, lots of rocks falling down the mountain and other things to look out for, but not tumbleweeds, yeah.
My sister, Jennifer, went to Pepperdine, and I remember going to go visit her in Malibu, and her friends would all ask me, Brian, are you going to get to come to college here too? And I'd have to say, I don't think I can. No. I mean, no, it wasn't against the school. It's so massively expensive to go to school there.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Well, welcome, Emily. We're going to hear more from you here in a moment. Angie, how about you? Where are you working today?
Hi.
Hey.
Yeah. Hi again. My journey has kind of been all over the place right now. I'm the director of recruitment for Arlington ISD. Before this position, I was a junior high principal in Arlington. Before that, I was a high school assistant principal, but I started my career as an English teacher at Haltom High School. I'm sorry, I'm waiting for all the boos and hisses. High school English teacher, and I was a cheerleader coach at Haltom for 10 years as well. And I have been an elementary assistant principal, and I was an adjunct professor for 3 years with DBU. So I have just kind of been all over the educational landscape. But not teaching currently. Hiring teachers, what I'm doing.
Yes.
Good. Well, and we're going to hear more from Angie here in a moment. And, you mentioned Arlington. That's also a location of our reunion coming up in July. So maybe, Angie, we could ask you to share some information about that as well. All right.
Yep.
Amy, welcome back.
Yes.
How are you today?
Hey, I'm fabulous.
Tell us what you're doing these days.
Well, this is my 27th. I'm finishing at my 27th year, and it's all been in special ed. And I started in Birdville ISD when I was at Foster Village Elementary, and I taught transitional, which is little friends with some emotional disturbances and behavior disorders. And I got hired on the next year on full contract at Glenview Elementary. And that's where I found my true love of preschool program with children for disabilities, which is formerly called PPCD. And now it's called Early Childhood Special Ed, ECSC. So I've been an ECSC teacher for little friends who are 3 to 5. And I've done that in Birdville and then South Lake Carroll. And now I'm happily over here in Fort Worth, which is where I live, at Western Hills Primary. And it's just, there's never a dull moment. And I love every day I can say I look forward to my job every day.
Amy, thank you so much. That's awesome. We're going to ask this question for all three of you, but Amy, since you have the floor, we'll start with you. What was it that got you into teaching? What was your inspiration that got you into this great field?
I can say that I can honestly say that I wanted to be a teacher since I was little, but I did not want to be a kindergarten, early childhood teacher. I wanted to be serious, English literature teacher. I'm going to teach Chaucer. I'm going to teach the Divine Comedy. And my mom at the time happened to be an early childhood teacher in Birdville. She taught kindergarten at OH Stowe. Because Amy, I don't know. I see something in you. No, I'm going to be a professor. And then 27 years later, here I am. Early childhood all the way.
Wow. So you knew right from the beginning. That's great. I
had a sneaking suspicion I belonged in the early childhood area.
Yeah.
I just was a natural rebel.
And with your mom being a teacher, that may have been some inspiration for you there too.
Yeah, she ended up retiring in 2004 as a principal in Birdville. Northridge Elementary, it was a nationally recognized Blue Ribbon school. And my dad retired from Smithfield Middle. And it just in the family.
Yep.
So it's been a happy way to grow up.
That's great. Emily, Angie, how about you?
I'll say that I have a distinct memory in first grade of putting my stuffed animals in my room and teaching them a lesson. My mother certified to be a teacher but never taught. And growing up, she always told me I should be a teacher. And I said, not going to do it. They don't make enough money. I don't want to be a teacher. And then I went into college with an undecided major, and they made me declare one. And I thought, well, I love reading, so I'll do English Lit, Amy. And then, what do you do as a minor? It's like, what are you going to do with the English Lit degree? Well, I guess I'll teach. And then I did student teaching at Haltom High School with Mary Clark, who was Gary Clark's wife at the time.
Oh.
I was assigned to her.
Wow.
Speaking of Chaucer, this is so funny. I was assigned to her senior English class to do student teaching. And I absolutely fell in love with it. And Mary was amazing. And at the time, Gary was the director of HR for Birdville. And so, Mary and I got along fantastic. I was really close with her until she retired, and she hasn't, passed away. So has Gary. But basically, he came to watch me student teach in the classroom and said, if you want a job at Haltom, there's one here for you, and offered me a job on the spot, and I took it. So that's how I got into teaching at Haltom, because Gary hired me, and he remembered me from Richland, not because I was in the AP office ever or in the principal's office, but he just remembered me. So yeah, that's how it happened for me.
Oh, Angie, that's great.
Yeah, I had no idea who's the director of HR. I guess I didn't really know Mary was his wife. I didn't know her. And then when I student taught with her, I found out, and she thought I was good and asked him to come watch me. And then the rest is history. So yeah, it really was kind of kismet. It was very weird to be teaching at Haltom High School in a sea of orange and black. And at the time, my brother was attending Richland. My brother's 6 years younger than I am and was at Richland High School playing football. So I would go to the game, the Haltom Richland game. I'm like, I have to sit on the Richland side. I absolutely have to, because I have to support my brother. And then my second year teaching is when I became the cheerleader coach, one of the cheerleader coaches for Haltom. So I was like, I can cheer for Haltom until my brother's playing and I got to be on the other side. And at the time I was doing JV, I wasn't doing varsity. And so it was kind of a house divided in myself. And then he graduated from Richland, and then I became the varsity coach. And so there was no fight anymore. And I was just on the sidelines at Haltom through the games. But it was, I'll tell you, the first couple of years walking around wearing orange and black and being a Buffalo, I was like, this is not okay. This doesn't feel right. I'm betraying my upbringing. Like, what the heck is going on? What helped is Haltom had built a new building, the new high school. And so when I started teaching, it was in the new school. So I didn't have to go to the old building over there.
I remember that.
Yeah. And I think I wouldn't have been able to handle that if I was in the old building. But being in the new building, I could kind of pretend, like, okay, this is a different school. But, yeah, it was a lot of fun. Honestly, it was a fantastic experience. I got really lucky.
What you're describing makes me think about 1995, the movie Dangerous Minds with Michelle Pfeiffer walking around this really rough school.
It was pretty close. Like pulling an orange and black shirt out of my closet. I'm like, is it Halloween every day? Who picked orange and black? This is ridiculous. And then, eventually you just drink the Kool-Aid. So, once you get to know the kids, then you're cheering for the kids, not the school anymore. And so at that point, it was over.
That's a great point.
Yeah, that's when you realize you're a true teacher, when you're like, it's not about me, it's all about the kids.
Yep, absolutely.
Angie, thanks so much. Emily, how about you? Tell us about your journey.
Definitely some similarities to both in that I remember wanting to be a teacher as a child and pulling out dolls and stuffed animals and things like that, teaching class. And both my parents were educators like Amy's. And so I had that, I guess, in my blood as well. But I also remember clearly my dad saying, do not become a teacher. It does not pay enough. You do not want to do this. And so I read an article around age 16 that made me want to work in advertising. So I was pursuing that for a while. But then I did end up going back to teaching. And kind of similar to Angie, I substituted, well, like you, Brian, I did some substituting. And one day the principal said, we'd like to have you stay here and teach. And that's how I ended up teaching high school. That was not on my plan. And stayed there 7 years. So definitely off my plan. But it was great too. I learned a lot and loved the kids, to Amy's point. Loved the kids I got to teach there. And it's so fun to get to see them now grown up with their own kids. It's wild.
Well, thank you all for sharing. The next question I want to ask you is, what was it that surprised you about being a teacher?
The educational preparation programs at college do nothing to prepare you for being a teacher.
Right. And I concur with Angie on that. Oh, my mercy.
It's like, it's philosophy and best case scenario. And it doesn't prepare you for the emotional needs of the students, really. You can prepare lessons, but those go out the window when you have a kid crying or something has happened. And so, the fact that basically teachers buy all their own supplies. I remember when I got hired, I went to the front office to gather my teacher supplies, and I got a box of chalk, because there were still chalkboards back then. I got a red pen, a black pen, a pencil, a tape dispenser, an eraser, and that was it. Those were my supplies to teach with. My mentor teacher, Mary Clark, actually bought me a basket of supplies, including an easy grater, which I'm sure we have all used. And so, yeah, it was kind of like you do these, 7-page lesson plans in college, and that is not the real world. So I think it didn't prepare me for that, but it also does not prepare you for how significant the bonds you make with kids are. You get out of I think people get out of teaching pretty quick if they don't like kids. And ironically, there's some teachers that don't seem to like kids, but once you realize, like Amy said earlier, you're there for the kids and not for the content. No one, and Emily said it, I'm still connected with students I taught to this day. And no one prepares you for the significance of the impact you have on students' lives, which, if you're lucky enough, you hear stories later, they tell you, and you're like, wow, like that. What? Like, because I said something or did something that affected the rest of your life, and then how much they impact you. So it's on both sides of the equation. Like you're kind of thrown in the deep end as a teacher, and it's sink or swim.
Wow.
Sure. I know when substituting, there were some things that surprised me that like age group, I would have thought, kind of like Amy was saying, I thought for sure it'd be high school level that I would like the most and where it would, fit. But I was being called K through 12 to come substitute. And there were 3 days where I was called to do kindergarten or elementary, but at least one of those days was kindergarten. And I thought, oh my goodness, I could never, ever, ever do this full time. And I had a new appreciation for my mom because she taught elementary school. So it was shocking to me. And then it was also shocking that I really loved junior high. I was so surprised by that. That's not what I ended up teaching, but I enjoyed that, which I just thought was weird. But that to me was surprising. And then when I was teaching full time, I think probably the biggest thing that was surprising was the hours needed, both for preparation and for grading. My parents both worked on grading things at home. I saw that all the time, but I don't think it clicked to me how much time they spent doing that and how much that would be demanded of me over Christmas break and now over summer. Like it's 12 months, of preparation or grading. You're always doing something. There's nobody that's, at least that I know of, that's really kicking back like at 3 p.m. or whatever. That is just such a fallacy. And so I think that's a shock probably to some people, how much time. I remember often when I was teaching high school, because I was the yearbook advisor, I'd be there 12 hours because we'd have an evening event where we had to take photos of the volleyball game or whatever. But 12 hours, that's a lot of more than what I expected and what I think a lot of people realize.
Just to kind of piggyback on what you guys were both saying, just the amount of time I worked right up until I signed on to this podcast. And when I sign off, I still have to work. And I've already sent everything home, week in advance for the parents to approve them. But I need to go back and make sure that all of my I's are dotted and T's are crossed. But also lesson plans on mentoring to teachers. There's just a lot of things that you don't think about. Like, it's just a lot more. But my first year teaching, when I was on true contract with Birdville, and this was when I was teaching PPCD, the now ECSC 3 and 4 year olds. And it wasn't really new, but it was new to me. This one friend had autism. I'm like, oh, I need to really research this. And this is not something that I'm not very familiar with. And so I did a lot of research and learned a lot about that very wide ranging spectrum. And then now here I am in year 27, and every single one of my little friends are autistic. It's surprising how as time advances, disabilities change, and it's never what you expect. When you get your feet in the water and you start swimming, you're like, oh, I got this.
Yeah.
But it also helps to have a very supportive campus and team in place with you.
One thing that I've always thought of as a teacher is that they have to do the same thing every single year. But Amy, what you just said makes me think it's always changing. There's something different every single year that teachers see more than others do, probably.
Well, and I'll say, secondary, even elementary, you have the same kids, but you're teaching different subjects throughout the day. And in secondary, you have different kids, different periods, and every day and every period is different because the kids you get are different and they're different needs. And so like I taught Romeo and Juliet for 9 years, 6 periods a day, but it was all different, because the kids were different. They had different needs. And so that's what I loved about teaching is you never knew what was going to happen, and you had to be able to pivot to, do it really well with the kids you had or whatever was going on. If it wasn't connecting, you had to find a way to connect. And then also, I think all really good teachers just entertain themselves for the most part. Like you do things so often, you're like, I'm going to entertain myself, and if someone else is entertained, it's bonus. But you love what you do so much that it's completely different every day. It's different every minute, different every hour. You just never know what's going to happen. So you can prepare, but that being in the moment and being responsive to the students is, I think, what makes teaching so much fun.
Pivot.
Yes.
And then the technology is something you have to keep up with too. That there's so many changes in technology or in House bills as far as what you can teach or how you have to do things. But there are all sorts of things you're having to keep up with. And I know in the things I teach, they're constantly changing. And now with generative AI, there are all sorts of discussions about what do we teach? How do we prepare our students to ethically use that in the workplace? And so you have to constantly stay up to date on your topic area, as well as the technology, as well as the rules, as well as the differences in students in each class, each semester, per year.
Now, one thing that I want to ask you is, now you've been teachers for a while, and looking back at the teachers that inspired you in high school or even in junior high or elementary, what would you like to go back and say to your previous teachers?
Thank you. Tell them thank you. Thank you so much for investing in our lives and caring about us as individuals. There were so many that I think really, truly do that. And what's amazing is to still be connected with some of them on Facebook and to get to still kind of be in their journey and them in our journey. And, love that. So like Mr. Allen and Mrs. Sales, Mrs. Tribble, I'm still connected with on Facebook. And I loved them from junior high and Madam Toombs from high school. So that I think that's so fun to get to still see what they're doing and for them to see what we're doing too.
Teaching in Birdville was a blessing because I was connected. I was still there, and having my brother go to Richland, I got to go back and see those teachers. And so Deborah Ezel was really impactful for me, not just for French, but for Dixie Bells. And so I got to continue to see her. A lot of teachers Emily mentioned, it was just really cool to also kind of start teaching alongside. And then also you realize it is such, like Amy said, such a family business that, I mentioned I was teaching with Mary Clark, and Mary and Gary's daughter, Holly, was a teacher at Haltom as well. And then she married Mark McCandless, who ended up being a Richland High principal. And so it was like you just got to be in this family that they're like, we raised you, kind of you were a student and now you're a partner with us, and being respected for that. It was really awesome. So I think just that love that we felt, that they really cared for us as students, is part of what made you wanted to continue to be a teacher. I remember for me, Karen Holcomb, I had for sociology, and I don't remember the lesson, but I do remember sitting in the desk and we were watching some film, and her message was really about just being a kind human being and paying attention to what people are going through. And it just struck me. It was like that moment in time that I'll remember forever. It's just locked in my mind about how the type of person I wanted to be in life. And it wasn't about a lesson. It wasn't what I was learning. It was about life. And that kind of blew me over. And I realized, to know that you as a teacher can impact someone's life beyond a lesson. And what you teach, I think, was the thing that I was like, that was invaluable to me, that she gave that lesson as a student. And so, it's really cool to be a part of that. And just, I agree with Emily, just thank you for what they did. Now, once you do it, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't realize all the time behind the scenes, because when they're teaching, they're there, they're energetic, they're talking to you. You don't see the lesson planning, the grading the papers, the late nights, the weekends, the training, the professional development. Back in the day, you created every lesson yourself. Like, there was no teacher pay teachers where you could buy somebody else's lesson. Everything was created from scratch. You don't see that as a student. And so to be a teacher and realize that's what they were doing to create those experiences for you, it's like, wow, it's just. Yeah,
I was in yearbook staff in high school, and then I became a yearbook advisor. And there were several things that I thought, I had no idea he had to do this. It's like dealing with budget, for example. And I remember doing fundraising and all sorts of things. I thought, wow, I did not have to deal with this as a student. And grading, obviously.
Brian, you and I went to Snow Heights Elementary, and I think that was just a storybook, idealistic,
perfect school that we were raised in. Mm-hmm. And then we transitioned to North Richland Junior High, had another just cast of amazing teachers, Mr. Waldrop and Mary Cates and Tribble and Kathy Sales. I mean, just lots of great teachers. And then we got to experience the Richland High School people. Yeah, huge thank you. And I just don't know how they got through without Google. And I think back to the teachers who had to do their original lesson plans, and all they had was this big manual that, they'd scroll through, they'd look back and forth. I'm like, oh, my mercy. And then they had the big blue
mimeograph. Oh, yes. I did many of tests and quizzes on that thing when I first started teaching.
Even when you say that word, my nose starts smelling that smell.
Yeah.
Purple ink and the smell.
Yes.
Oh, my eyes are burning. Emily, I wish there was a way you could have made the yearbook. It was perfect the way it was, by the way. But I think I wish you could have like a scratch and sniff section of the pages so you could go back and. I'm kidding.
We need the mimeograph, scratch and sniff. They need to make one of those for you.
That's what we need.
Yeah, because pictures of the cafeteria. You could scratch the pictures of the cafeteria and smell the square pizzas. And,
right.
Yeah.
Oh, we still have those in my school district.
Oh, wow. Hasn't changed.
Some things never change.
Pretty good stuff.
Well, as we're wrapping up the school year, a lot of students give their teachers a thank you gift for the year. And I know the parents are usually in charge of getting those gifts. So for our fellow classmates listening to this podcast, if they have kids in school, what suggestions do you want to give them on behalf of all teachers out there on what gift ideas do teachers really like to get?
I would say restaurant gift cards are excellent. Those are things that everybody could use. I had a mom who made me cinnamon rolls and gave me the recipe with it. So we still have that recipe. So it's like the gift that keeps on giving. And it had a sweet note with it. And I think that maybe above anything, a sweet note showing sincere appreciation of all this extra work that they don't know about is priceless too. Just knowing that you're appreciated and that your time is worthwhile.
Yeah, I would concur. Elementary teachers do pretty good about getting swag because they just have like 25 kids and there's only one teacher. Secondary teachers kind of start losing out a little bit because, you have a student and your kid could have 8 teachers, if they're in athletics or whatever. And so it's really hard for a parent to buy like 8 gift cards or whatever. So I will say, if you're a parent and you can't really afford that or you don't want to, do that, the handwritten note, I have a box to this day filled with notes my students have written me all the way back to my first year.
I do too.
And that's because there was a teacher at the time who said, any note you get from a student, keep it because you're going to have some bad days and you might only get one every year, but you want to be able to go back and remember that it's worth a purpose. So I still have that box today filled with those notes. And so that just having a kid sit down and say, thank you, I appreciated that. It does wonders because it validates why you're doing what you're doing. I had a student one time give me a bookmark. And I mean, it cost nothing. It was little, but he knew of course, English teacher and a reader. And it was from him. And he's like, thank you, miss. And I mean, that in itself, trumps. The gift cards are great. Starbucks is always great. But I will say, just force your teenager to sit down and write a thank you note to their teachers. That they will appreciate to no end.
And I also just agreed. I don't get a whole lot of handwritten notes from my little learners per se, but I get something they've drawn. Mm-hmm. And then a precious handwritten note from the family or from the mom or from the dad, or even just that child trying to write his name. And then a picture he's drawn. I get a lot of restaurant gift cards, Amazon gift cards. I'm so blessed. I also get a lot of Bath and Body Works stuff and a lot of Bath and Body Works antibacterial stuff. Like, thank you. Thank you. You are doing the Lord's work right there. And I think back, I'm like, I don't recall getting my high school teachers anything. And I know I wrote some junior high teachers some things, and elementary, of course. I mean, like Angie said, we get the swag. Even at my school, when they come to school, it's such a fun and happy environment. The parents are very thankful. It's just an uplifting experience when the parents are like, You made a difference in my kid's life. Even if it's just spoken, you made a difference in my kid's life. I need you to know that.
Amy, thank you so much. That's awesome. So one question I want to ask each of you is, there's been a lot of great TV shows about teaching, even like Saved by the Bell, for example, or maybe some movies like Dead Poet Society, Dangerous Minds, like the one with Michelle Pfeiffer. What's your favorite movie or TV show about teaching?
Freedom Writers was really good. Writers with the
Oh,
W.
that's a good one.
Yeah.
I'll say one that's funny that recently, that's a newer one, is Abbott Elementary. It's hilarious. It is kind of a caricature of principals or teachers, but there are nuggets of truth in everything that they do in that series. So it's pretty good when you laugh at it. Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Surprised no one said Billy Madison, but that's okay. Those are great movies because, especially from what y'all have shared with us just now, there's so many great stories to be told from schools, from teaching, from that adventure that you chose to be teachers. So from the bottom of my heart to say thank you for all the work you do. And like you said, to all of our teachers who inspired all of us to where we are now. If you're listening to this podcast, thank you so much for every connection you made with us, and even the small ones and big ones. Thank you so much for that. And we look forward to having our reunion in July, but looking back at those high school years, what are some of the things that stand out to the three of you that you want to share with us today?
For me, I would say I spent so much time with band, like on the practice field, at the games, pep rallies, in the band hall, band camp, in the bus, all of that. So I've got so many memories related to band, but also working on yearbook and in that classroom a lot.
That yearbook was excellent. It was so good. So good job.
Thank you. Goofy moments come to mind. I remember Mr. Oh my gosh, my mind just went blank. But I remember him saying, "And the mighty Finns kicked Russia out of Finland," and he kicked his feet up in the air. Just fun things with them, and eating like Captain's wafers and Diet Coke from the machine in Mr. Tillery's classroom for lunch, so I could keep working on math. But most importantly were the time with friends. And just that's what stands out, is the time with the people, especially with our peers. And I love that we can stay in touch with some of them, and that is just precious.
When we talk about high school, what comes to mind is I think anytime anybody's involved in something extracurricular. So like Emily mentioned band, of course, I was in Dixie Bells. So the majority of the things I remember about that, of course, I remember the mix master in the middle of the hallway where you had to like go right to go left. You could not cut through, you had to go around. And I remember off-campus lunch. My senior year, I had Mr. Gillette for government, and we had a split lunch. So I'd run to my car and go to either Taco Bueno for the Mexi dips and chips, Grandy's for a 6-pack of rolls and gravy, or McDonald's, and basically eat it on the car on the way back, because you had to be back in his room by the time the bell rang, or he wouldn't let you in. And he's interesting. He's a teacher I really remember, because I remember one time we all showed up after lunch and he was wearing a paper bag on his head, sitting behind his desk, like a grocery bag. I still have the photo somewhere. I'm going to find it for the reunion. I don't know why. He would also, he had something that if we were talking too loud, they had those metal teacher desks. He would get underneath it and roam it around the desk to make a bunch of noise. Anyway, so that memory, that stands out quite a bit. I remember Mrs. Mickish class, AP English, which Brian, I know you had Mickish, Emily did too. Mm-hmm. And I remember, I think we all had to bring in records or tapes and play songs one time. Oh, we did a journal. Our senior year, every day we had to keep a journal of like what we did or whatever. We had to do journal writing every day. I still have that spiral notebook to this day. Uh-huh. And I can go back and see what I was doing and thinking my senior year. So that was super cool. So I think, it's just the friends and the times and the things that we did, I think, at that time period in our lives that our own children don't experience, because, other than Atari and a landline, like our Commodore 64. We didn't have like stuff to keep us occupied. And, there were the channels on the TV and my parents were watching it. So it was just being outside, running around with your friends, driving around the town, going to Cruise Cooper over by UTA, our cruise exchange in the stockyards. Stuff like that. TPing people's houses, like, seemed to be every weekend, something you do, because what else is there to do, right? So those are really, really good memories. I really cherish that. And the fact that for 35 years, I've stayed connected to people, David Bradley, for DBF. We used to live across the street from each other, 2 years ago, like in apartment complexes. And I've known him since 4th grade. I told him, like, I have known you. You're the person I've known the longest that I'm still talking to. 40 years I've known him. So that's just really, really cool and special to have that, and that we have these shared memories we can still talk about. I talked to tons of people about my high school reunion and getting together in the 35, and they're like, oh, we didn't even have a 30. We didn't even have a 20. And I'm like, what we have as a high school class is really unusual. Really highly unusual, that so many people are friends on Facebook. So many people are still hanging out and talking. Like, you don't see this in other places. And so it's really special to have the shared memories that we can talk about these things together. And, we know what we were talking about. It's bonding, So I'll remember those.
I remembered the teacher. It was my history teacher, Mr. Eklund. That's who kicked the class. I had to throw it out there, Mr. Eklund.
That sounds like Mr. Eklund.
Yes. Remember him dancing at a pep rally too? Didn't you dance too, Brian? Were you doing that day too? Do you remember?
I remember him dancing, so that means he was probably a much better dancer than I was at the time, because I remember the dancing. Yeah. The pep rallies were a lot of fun, for sure. I don't know if they're still doing those or not today, but I feel like when they have those at our school today, a lot of the kids go, is it optional or required? Well, we never asked that question. We just went, because why would you not go?
And wanted to go. For me, I was, I played junior varsity and varsity tennis, but I was also heavily involved in choir. And then my church youth group, North Richland Hills Baptist Church. I grew up in Meadow Lakes, and that the next door neighborhood is Diamond Lock. I remember riding my bicycle to Diamond Lock and meeting my friends at Diamond Oaks Country Club to play tennis. Just fun things like that. Whataburger late at night. Yes, Taco Bueno, and dashing to Taco Bueno during lunch to get that Mexican dips and chips. Just the camaraderie I think that we all have as a class. Even when we go to the reunions, it's like we all know each other. We may not have hung out much in high school, but we all know each other and we feel like a family. And I think, as Angie alluded to earlier, even teaching in the same school district you were raised in, but coming back and also going to a reunion of the people that you grew up with, it is a family atmosphere. And I don't think other districts, other high schools, other places have this. And a lot has to do with Karen Laird Knox does really keep that bond very close. And I have to give a lot of credit to her, although she is a Smithfield Raider. But I truly do love everything about Richland High School, and especially my path to Richland was Snow Heights, North Richland, and Richland. I never look back and go, oh yeah, my high school days weren't so good. Everything was great.
I agree. And Amy, in honor of all the great work that Karen's doing to keep us all together, maybe the three of us from North Richland should make her an honorary Falcon, if that's even possible.
We could probably make that happen, I'm sure.
We can probably make that happen. I suspect she'll politely decline.
There's some pride still up there, isn't there?
There's a lot of pride there.
Well, we'll talk to her at the reunion. And speaking of the reunion, coming up in about 12 weeks from now, what is it that you're looking forward to the most about the 35th reunion?
Hugs.
Hugs?
I am on the reunion. I'm on the reunion committee, so I have I have more knowledge about, of course, the sneak peek at the venue, and there's going to be quite a few surprises Saturday night that we really haven't let on at all about. But we want to make it really, really special for people to come, very nostalgic type things. I'll say, this hearsay, and we've been talking about it, is a pretty phenomenal facility. It's so cool. It's a speakeasy. We have the entire event space to ourselves. It's basically a bar and a dance floor on one side and a lounge area and food and tables on the other. The food's phenomenal. The committee has been meeting every 2 weeks for, it seems like 6 months now, maybe. So like, kudos to Karen. She's like, y'all better meet every 2 weeks because we got stuff to do. So, I think there's just been a lot of heart and soul put into this reunion because we want people to feel like it's worthwhile to come, to spend the money and everything. And so I'm looking forward to seeing people that I'm Facebook friends with, but I don't get to see on a regular basis. Like I know what's going on in their lives, but we don't get to sit and hang and talk. And I think that's what's so cool, like Amy said with Hugs, is we're a family, we stayed that way. So even when you see people at a reunion that you haven't talked to in person for years, it's like you never miss a beat. And that's what I've loved about the past reunions. I remember like the 15 or 20, whichever one it was, I hung out with people that I really wasn't friends with in high school, that I knew in elementary and junior high, and then we kind of went our separate ways because we were doing different things. But we were the ones who bonded together. I mean, I've hung out with people that I wasn't really friends with in high school, but we just know each other and we have a shared experience. So I'm looking most forward to that, is seeing in person all these people that my vision of them is, in 7th grade, 8th grade, 4th grade, 12th grade, and I get to see them in person and remember those shared experiences we had. Like Emily, I think we had Miss Nauer together in science.
Oh, yeah.
Remember we made those game boards?
Oh, I have Miss Nauer too.
I have a picture of that. So, I mean, we shared classes and experiences. Yeah. It's so cool to reconnect and remember that. So that's what I'm really looking forward to.
Emily, how about you?
Sadly, I'm not going to get to be there. I've got other places I'm going to have to be at the same time. So I will miss it. And I'm sorry I definitely would have enjoyed those hugs, as Amy mentioned. At the last one, I remember going to, where was it? Dave & Buster's? Is that where the extra event was?
Yes.
Do you remember that? That was so fun because it was a very like hugging environment, or sitting around with each other in that fun space. And that was really fun to see everybody there. But yeah, I'm going to have to miss this one. I'm sorry.
Well, if your plans changed, we hope to see you there. And because you're on the yearbook, everybody's faces better than everybody. I'm going to be standing next to you. Like, Emily, who's that right there? Who's that? You're going to know everybody's names.
Yeah, Emily, you'll just have to plan to make the 40th.
Yes.
So, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I did think it was great how the committee has prepared things. And I think this is the same cost that it was for the first one, like the 10-year, I think was also like $60 or $65, whatever. Isn't it? It's about the same, where I thought, wow, that's amazing that they've kept it at that, which I thought was great. So great work, Angie, and the rest of that committee.
It really is, Karen. Honestly, we just kind of do her bidding, but, and we have amazing sponsors. Which I know Brian has done plugs on the podcast for the sponsors, but who have, value our class and put up some money to help pay for some of these things to keep the ticket costs down low. So, it's going to be a really, really cool event. It really is.
Thank you, Angie. And hey, you know what, Amy, Angie, Emily, thank you so much for joining our podcast today. It's been great catching up with you, hearing about your journeys as teachers. And a big thank you to all the work you do and all of our teachers that taught us at Richland High School and got us where we are today. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
And to you listening to this podcast, thank you so much. Appreciate that. If you want to listen to the next one and be notified, just follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartMedia, also on YouTube. It's a free link on YouTube. We're available there as well, and some great videos to watch from our past at Richland High School as well on our YouTube channel. And you can buy your tickets if you haven't done so already through the PayPal link in the podcast description. You can also find that link on our Facebook page. So I look forward to seeing you there so you can join us with more stories to tell, more things to share, and more hugs, like Amy said. Thanks so much. Until next time, for the Richland High School Pre-Reunion Countdown, this is Brian Kirk.